Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked and locked? Here we go. Your dial is set correctly to USA Prepares. And we broadcast 2 hours from high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains. 9 a.m. through 11 a.m. Central Time. If you'd like to call us, 866-582-9933. 866-582-9933. Telephone listen line is 605-477-3249. Gwyneth Isaacs is with us live in Australia. Welcome, Gwyneth.
Hello, Vincent. How are you this morning?
I'm really, I'm doing fine. You know, Gwyneth, I wanted to, can you hear me now? I guess you can.
Yeah, I've got you just fine.
Okay, I'm looking, just give me 1 second, please. Okay, I'm looking at the delay. Now, I have a 2-second delay to GCN, and then we probably have another second or so, maybe even 2 to you. So we're looking at about darn close to a 4-second delay. Now, normally it's not like this, but I guess we're getting extra treatment today from the internet. But so I just want to keep that, have you keep that in mind as we go through this. So just expect a delay. And I'll let you know when it clears up. It's starting to get a little better right now. Okay. So, hey, Gwyneth, I want to congratulate you. I have received a total of 4 complaints ever since broadcasting about 6 years ago. A total of 4. Now, 1 or 2 of them I got all by myself. Another one I got with David Christopher. And he was talking about milk and why would anybody want to drink milk from a 1-ton animal. And a farmer called up the radio station and said, hey, there's no such thing as a 1-ton cow, 2,000-pound cow, and complained. Well, he was trying to make a point that you should be, if you're going to drink milk, you should drink milk from an animal the same size as we are, rather than one that might be, 7 to 10 times our size. So I got that complaint. Another complaint was from a woman who was in the Springfield Village, and she said that if I didn't like this country, why don't I just leave? This is when I first started broadcasting. Now, my opinions haven't changed since then. And I said, well, no, I'm not going to leave. I love this country, and I want them to leave. The people that are causing all these problems for us. I'm talking about the white-collar criminals. I'm talking about the Congress thugs, the Senate thugs. People in government who are causing all kinds of problems. So I told her I'd buy her dinner if she wanted to come to our meetup. And I think she did, but she never told me who she was, because I saw this woman I didn't recognize. So anyway, now the fourth complaint, you and I got together. And I'm all excited about it. And I'm going to respond to it. And this is an email that I received forwarded to me from John Stadtmiller. Now, John Stadtmiller is the owner of Republic Broadcasting. Republic Broadcasting does alternative news, alternative broadcasting, just the way we do here at Genesis Communications Network. And Republic Broadcasting does something that no other network I know of does. And that is, John Stadtmiller is kind enough to replay our broadcast intact, unedited, with all the commercials, directly from GCN. And this is all with permission. So what I'm saying is, you never see ABC's programming on CBS or NBC. But we are the exception here at USA Prepares. And I believe it's for two reasons. One, John Stadtmiller likes our programming, and another is John Stadtmiller's my friend. So he's been to the house, and he likes what we do, and we're on the same page in just about everything, just as you and I are, Guineith. So here's the email. Came in on September 12th, and this is to John Stadtmiller. And I mentioned to him that I was going to do this today. So it's with his knowledge. I'm not going behind anybody's back. So I'm a guy named Jimmy. Good morning, John. First of all, you know I appreciate what you do with the station and programming and participate where I can. I also understand that you do not have control over your show hosts or the subject matter they cover. However, there is one show and one host that just lost any listenership or support, which places me in a dilemma. How do I support Republic Broadcasting knowing that my support for you will also support him indirectly? The show is USA Prepares with Vincent Finelli, and the reason I have lost all respect for him is simple. This morning, September 12th, 2017, about 5:30 Mountain Time, he went on a well-controlled rant about a veteran in front of him at Lowe's getting a veteran's discount, and he did not. You give a discount to people who go to other countries and blow things up and kill people for corporations and won't give discounts to me, or fat people, or blind people? That's a loose quote, but it was all covered in his 30-plus minute rant. And the Brit woman, now that would be you, Guineith, supported and agreed with him, interjecting digs along the way the whole time. As you understand, I'm a vet, and I discuss subjects of my knowledge on 2 shows on your network hosted by vets, and I don't think I have ever heard you disparage vets in the history of my listening to you personally. I've heard most every host and you comment and complain about how certain members of our government abuse and use the military to do things quite uncommon or bordering on criminal, and I've joined you and them on the criticism. We should and obviously do hold our government and its minions accountable, but we draw the line at the grunts on the ground and on the sea who do the work, and those lose limbs and sustain injuries doing their job. Every veteran who's seen combat, extended deployments, missed the birth or birthdays of their children, or the loss of a family or loved ones while deployed, or endless list of other things that Mr. Finelli has never dealt with while they're serving their comrades and country. He can rant and pose accusations, any accusations he desires at our government or organizations that do its bidding, lawfully or not, and that's his right, and I will defend it to my dying breath. However, when he goes off on some veteran getting a discount at a home improvement store, and the fat blind or him don't, he's lost any respect or support that I could offer indefinitely. John, I would appreciate it if you would express my disdain for Vincent Finelli and the reasons why, and explain to him that a sincere apology to all veterans at the beginning of each hour of each show for a month might improve his appearance with some listeners. And I think should be required of him due to your listenership. But unless he has a sincere change of heart on the subject, he will always be suspect in my mind. John, I will continue to participate in programs, the programs I do now, and will draw as many listeners to you as I can. But as I said above, USA is off my listening support lists. And I suspect that there will be many others that will as well. Could you please look into how I can support the station, but not him? Your consideration would be greatly appreciated. Thank you, Jimmy, a.k.a. Desert Eagle Shooters. So that's what he said. Any comments, Guineith?
Hello. I think I had that email forwarded to me earlier, and I replied to a comment, and I want my discount. And I'll tell you why. Okay? I'll tell the listening audience why. I think I've already told you why in the email, but I'll go through the gist of it. I arrived in Australia in 1991. Okay? That was a long, long time ago. I grew up in New Zealand. I'm not British. I've never been to Britain, although I do come from a British blue blood family, but we've been on my mother's side in the Antipodes for Mum's a second generation, and I'm a third generation down under person. Okay? I have been, since I've been here in Australia, especially since I met my husband and became the stepmother of his children, tormented and harassed by the official powers in 3 states in this country, okay? Because I would not let these evil people have our children. I wouldn't let them have my husband's children, my stepchildren, and I would not let them have my children. And at the most recent episode, when they tried to impose their will on us by force en masse, we actually had, I believe, members of the military working with corrupt police to basically try and kill me. And I suffered as a result of that, and as a result of the other negative interactions. I suffered from PTSD, and of course it's less so now. I am gradually healing from it. But I would believe that counts as me being in military combat and having come out the other side.
And
I
therefore
think we're
your discount?
heading into a break, aren't we?
Yeah, we'll be right back. Guineith Isaacs is with us. She's live in Australia, and we're talking about the 4th complaint that I've learned about since broadcasting of about 6 years. And I read an email from a listener to, I guess a former listener of ours, on Republic Broadcasting. Now, this broadcast, in verbatim, is carried on Republic Broadcasting 1 day later. So, this particular listener, his name is Jimmy. I don't think he's a member of our class. I would say he was a listener, or used to be a listener. It was kind of angry with me about what he perceived my position on the military is. And I wrote a response to John Statmiller. It's probably equally as long as the email that he sent to John Statmiller complaining about me. And of course, John Statmiller is the owner of Republic Broadcasting. And Guineith, you were talking about that you have been abused by people in uniform, and that you've been in combat resisting them, right?
Yes, although I didn't use violence, okay? They were the ones using violence against me. We were forced to use evasive-type techniques in order to spare our lives, because they wanted to kill us. Anybody who sets a pack of Alsatians on somebody in a forest and stands remotely waiting for the result, that's an attempt at killing somebody, because those dogs are going to go into hunt mode. And I would say we survived for 3 reasons. For one thing, we had God and his angels looking after us, primarily. the second one was I'd been in the habit of using a dog or dogs for hunting myself, so I knew what a hunting dog's behavior would be like, okay? And basically these Alsatians reverted to hunt mode, okay? That's what they were doing. They'd been trained to hunt human beings through the forest when released, okay? And we all know what the end result of a successful hunt usually is. It's something that's dead. The third one is because I had bought and read a copy of a particular book which is called the SAS Survival Handbook. And I would recommend that to every member of the class to go out to your local bookshop. It's available in every bookshop, the SAS Survival Handbook. And if you I wouldn't say that every technique in there is applicable, but certainly a large number of them are. And the SAS are the elite troops of the British Army. They can survive anywhere on the earth with absolutely nothing. And, they're the best at military survival. Now, the thing is, okay, we got out of there alive, which was not their intention. Their intention was to kill us in that state forest. I say that in my humble opinion, members of the military were involved, and that was for two reasons. Two of the vehicles that were used to try and trace us through the forest, one of them was Black Hawk helicopters, and I don't know of any police force that has spare Black Hawks flying around. And the other one was a particular type of plane, which is a spotter plane called a Red Devil, okay, used by military forces all over the world, used by the Royal Australian Air Force to train all of its pilots, as far as I know, and not used by the police. So this was a operation, joint operation, as far as I have been able to ascertain. And of course, this is just what I have been able to figure out in my head, okay, with my own logic. WA police, crooked members of the WA police, West Australian police, and working with members of the Australian military, okay, specifically, I think, the Air Force, but probably other branches. I don't know. I don't know the details of what went on. All I can report is the vehicles that were involved. And I know that the Air Force uses Red Devils, and they were there on that day.
We're going to a break. Guineith Isaacs is with us. And Guineith, it's going to take me a substantial part of this segment to read my response. I wrote this to John Statmiller, and I'm going to read verbatim what I sent to him. Yep. And then we're going to play a clip about my thoughts in 2013 about the government closing of the World War II Memorial, okay, and also the Mount Rushmore closing in 2013. So here's my response. John Statmiller, please thank Jimmy, and I use his last name, for his comments. They're very well said. I'm glad that he was listening. Please feel free to forward this to Jimmy. Here are my thoughts. Loosely, he has paraphrased what I said. In the same broadcast, I also said that our military deserves full medical and mental care for what they've gone through. But I also said that there are many people whom are underprivileged and could use a Lowe's discount as well. And they are handicapped, wheelchair-bound, overweight, underweight, red, black, yellow, white, men, women, blind, deaf, and dumb. Many of them are discriminated in employment situations, even if we don't want to admit it. Shouldn't they receive a discount as well? I have a problem with treating groups as special. Lowe's used to give contractors a 5% discount because they spent more money with Lowe's, and then stopped it because Lowe's said that it was unfair to give some people special treatment, which is exactly what they're doing for veterans. As told to me by Lowe's Senior Store Management, I believe the military has done a lot of damage to the planet, our collective home, in the name of protecting our freedom. Sometimes they are protecting our freedom, and sometimes not. I know a young Navy man who used to aim the ship's cannon at his target, until one day I asked him if he ever thought about the carnage when that shell hits its target. He became a chaplain. Depleted uranium, blowing up the Bikini Islands, vaccinating the soldiers, and the list goes on and on. My grandfather, father, and most of my uncles were combat veterans. All were scarred for the rest of their lives. All of their immediate families suffered profoundly. None received any discounts from anyone. None asked for any. Do I respect the veterans? Absolutely. And so does everyone I know. Do I respect corporations and old men who put young men and women in harm's way? Not so much. Is our government neglecting veterans? Yes. Do I demand that they are fully taken care of, to treat their suffering? Absolutely. Have I come to the aid of veterans on the air? Yes, many times. Should they receive special discount from Lowe's, AT&T, Home Depot, and Disney? No, unless others who are suffering get the same discounts as well. I plan on discussing this in the next few days, including reading Jimmy's email in full. His name omitted, unless he does not want me to. I suggest Jimmy consider continuing supporting the network in spite of his difference of opinion with my feelings about special group discounts. In fact, I've discussed on air that I have a problem with McDonald's giving seniors special prices on coffee. I'm a senior. But I do not have a problem with lower prices on volume purchases. All the best, Vincent Finelli. That was my email verbatim. Brad, our engineer, would you please play my YouTube response to the 2013 closing of our World War II memorial? This is my feeling about veterans. Brad, are you going to be playing that? Oh, okay. All right. He has a problem, a technical problem, and he's going to restart it. Brad, do you have a feel for when we're going to be restarting that? Okay.
The federal government partial shutdown has taken a dire turn for our country. Politicians have shown their true colors. They've demonstrated that they are not on the side of we the people. Our World War II memorial belongs to us. It's a remembrance of the ultimate price many have paid. Losing life, limbs. Many have been wounded, but all have been scarred for their entire lives. The National Park Service has been ordered to make life difficult for us. Exactly who is responsible for these actions? My father volunteered to fight for our country in World War II, to protect and defend her from the attack by the Imperial Japanese Navy. His brothers enlisted. All the men of fighting age in our family enlisted. My dear friend Paul, now deceased, recently would tell me over and over just how important that honor flight from Missouri to Washington, D.C. was. He had the opportunity in the final days of his life to visit the World War II memorial. It was a memorial to him and those like him who fought to defend the United States of America. He rekindled friendships, the memories, the shared tears. All those serving in World War II who saw killing action were permanently scarred, including Paul and my father. The haunting memories of the burning bodies, the torn flesh, the rotting flesh were ever present until their deaths. And our federal government has set up barricades to keep wheelchaired veterans, 80 to 90-year-old men, and their chaperones out of our World War II memorial. Those same 80 to 90-year-old veterans served in the Army, the Navy, and the Marines. Veterans pushed their wheelchairs right through the barricades, the same way they acted to win World War II. And they have every right to do so. They have every right to be there. They're on public property. The federal government responded with a forklift and 7 employees to erect more barricades. The federal government escalated with interlocking barricades wired together so our veterans without tools could not get through. Intentionally, the federal government locked down the World War II memorial so our veterans could not get through. Your National Park Service has been ordered by the federal government to block off walking and bicycle trails so you can't use them. They blocked off the home of our very first president, George Washington. That's located in Mount Vernon, Virginia. The property is not even government property. It belongs to the Mount Vernon Ladies Association. Your National Park Service has been told, make it difficult for us, and they are. My question to you is, are they trying to incite a riot by pushing us around, by pushing around men in wheelchairs who have built this country and prevented us from speaking Japanese and German? They won World War II for all of us. The federal government is out of control. Let me be very clear. I'm not advocating violence in any way, shape, or form from we the people. But I ask those of you in government, there will be a day when you will need to decide whether you will obey unlawful orders or not. And to the police, start thinking about all those tickets you're writing. Do you sleep well at night? Targeting your neighbors? Fining them with points? Increased insurance costs? Fees? Court costs? They can't afford it. We're in a depression. Do you think that those people who you fined and targeted will ever forget? We are America. We're in this together. I suggest you take that stick out of our eye.
Well, I think it continues, but it stopped a little early. And I apologize. The replay of that was in slow motion, if you will. I didn't record it at that speed, but I think by the time it was copied many times, it was slowed down a little bit. Brad, can you play the second clip, which is my response to the closing of Mount Rushmore? Okay. Brad is setting that up right now. And then after we hear that, I'd love to hear Guineith's response. Okay, here we go.
Our federal government dreams up the most amazing stunts to harm we the people. The National Park Service, under direction from the highest levels of the federal government, has placed barriers along the highway, preventing motorists from pulling over and looking at Mount Rushmore from a distance. Mount Rushmore features sculptures of the faces of 4 United States presidents: George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Theodore Roosevelt, and Abraham Lincoln. But during the partial government shutdown, the national monument is off limits to you. Here's my question to the current administration. Just what do you think George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Theodore Roosevelt, and Abraham Lincoln would think about your latest stunt? The stunt to keep us from looking at the monument that we paid for, built, and we own. I suggest you take that stick out of our eye. For more information, stay with us. USAPrepares.com.
There you have it. So that is my response to complaint number 4 about our broadcast. That's my position on veterans. And my point is, I don't have a problem with people who are in the military. I have a problem with groups receiving special preferential treatment because of the group that they belong to. When I was applying for college, many of you know that I was taught by the Jesuits. I was in a college preparatory program or school in high school. It's a school that teaches people what to expect in college and how to prepare for college. Well, I'll tell you the rest of that story in special groups when we come back. And I have a real problem with preferential treatment for people just because they are a member of a group, a man-made group. We'll be right back. So, Jimmy, I just want to let you know that was a response to your email to John Stettmiller. And do I have a problem with veterans? No. I think many have suffered horrific injuries, both mental and physical. And I demand that they receive medical treatment, bona fide treatment for their injuries. I believe that everyone who enters the military service and survives boot camp is scarred. I also believe that parents, if you see a military recruiter on campus of your child's high school, that you demand that military recruiter leave immediately. Because that military recruiter is going to put your child in harm's way at many levels. The unknown injections, immunizations, the radiation, the projectiles, the sounds, the concussions, the rough physical abuse, the mental abuse. Just for starters. Okay, so my little story. When I graduated high school, I applied to a college that specialized in teaching teachers. My father was a graduate of that particular college, and one of his very dear friends was a chairman of one of the departments in that college. And I was denied acceptance. My grades were okay. I hadn't been in trouble with the law. There were no blemishes on my record of any kind. It might have said that, I was an independent thinker. That's probably true. But I thought that's what colleges wanted. But I wasn't denied acceptance because of that. I was denied acceptance because I was not a member of a special group. So that summer, between graduating high school and first semester of college for me, I was pumping gas at a gas station, and we also did air conditioning repairs. So I was an air conditioning technician, did brake jobs, oil changes, things like that, and pumped gas all at the same time. And this young man pulled up in his red car, and he had one of those college stickers on his back window, brand new sticker. And it had the name of the college that I applied to. I said, wow, are you going to that school? He said, yeah. I said, how'd you do on the exam? He said, what exam? I said, the entrance exam. He said, I didn't take one.
Wow.
Yeah. So, who was he? Well, I don't know. But I can tell you some of his characteristics. He was a male, and he was black. Let me tell you the rest of the story. I really appreciate him getting that slot in that college. I really do. Because by him getting that slot, and people who were also given preferential treatment at that time, they prevented a lot of white guys from getting into schools. The government was responsible for this, our government. And here's what happened. The beginning of every class, during the start of every semester, we were handed a postcard. It was like 5 by 7. And that postcard had 9 categories on it. And you were to indicate which one you fit in. Were you Asian? Were you from Hawaii? Were you a Native American, an Indian? Were you black? There are 9 categories. The 9th was other. There was no selection for white. Not one. So anyone who was white checked off the other. So here's what happened. They were tracking who was in school. And thanks to that young man and others like him, I got into a much better university. Top 40. Gwyneth, you and I will be right back, and you can share some of your stories. Everyone all set? Hour number 2 of USA Prepares. Gwyneth Isaacs is with us, and during the first hour, we talked about a response to complaint number 4 that we have received at USA Prepares. And you know, I talk with John Statmiller, I talk with Ted Anderson, I talk with the owners of radio stations. And you know, when Sonny Skidmore calls me from KLID, an affiliate radio station, AM 1340 in Poplar Bluff, Missouri. I love chatting with her. And, I ask her the same question. Are you getting any complaints? No. For years. No complaints. So that means one of two things. Maybe one of three things. Either people who are have us tuned to their radio station are too lazy to complain, or they agree with us, or nobody's listening. Now, I don't think the third is the case. I think there are plenty of people listening. So I don't think that they're too lazy. I think that they agree with us, and they're glad that somebody's saying it. So, Guineith, do you have any comments about either the clips that I played? And I apologize for the clips that the speed that was that they were played. That was in slow motion. That is not my voice, and it was not meant to disguise my voice. If you go to YouTube and you type in Vincent Finelli, Finelli, by the way, that's my real name, and you type in response to closing the WW2 Memorial, you'll hear it in normal speed. And if you go to the response of the Mount Rushmore closing, you'll hear that in normal speed. So it's not like I tried to disguise my voice. That's not it at all. My voice was the same voice that you hear on the radio. It's just that when it was recorded for playback today, there's a setting that you can record it at a different speed, or you can play it back at a different speed. Now, why is that? Well, I'll tell you why. Because sometimes on the radio, if you have a commercial, you want your commercial to be, let's say it's a 60-second commercial, it can't be 60 full seconds. Because if it is, your commercial, the last syllable of your 60-second commercial will bang right into the next commercial. So they want commercials to be like 59 and a half seconds. So how do you make that happen? How do you actually record to 59 and a half seconds or 29 and a half seconds for a 30-second commercial? Well, you can adjust the speed of the recording or the playback to make it fit. Okay?
Yeah.
That's what you do. When I record a commercial, what I do is I write it, I type it out in large print, one sentence per line, and then I will record it. And let's say it's 2 seconds too long. Well, I'll look at the gaps in the spacing of the sentences, and I'll just trim until I get to the exact length it needs to be. That's how I do it. Or if it's too short, I either add some more words, or I add a little bit more space to give pauses at the right time. That's how I do it. So that's why there is this setting for speeding up or playing back. And since we're talking about this, Guineith, let me just give one more piece of information about how radio works. There is what's called a tape delay. And sometimes someone may call and use some language that is unacceptable for airing. The person may use some profanity, maybe a caller. And the radio engineers, like Brad today, has no idea when that might happen. A person may call into any program and just start out with profanity. Or a person may say, hey, Rush, you're doing so... I love what you do, Rush. You're like the best. If it weren't for you, I wouldn't know how to think. And thanks so much. And then lace into profanity. Okay, that could happen. So there's a delay. Well, how do you make up for that delay? Should you have to cut out a few seconds of profanity before you dump that caller? Well, that's where you can speed up or slow down the broadcast so that it all fits within the exact timing of the clock of the broadcast. So that's why, class, sometimes you hear commercials go faster and faster and faster, or they slow down a little bit. That's why you hear that. Okay? It's because of the delay and the compensation for those few seconds. And how is it done? Well, there's a computer that takes care of that. So there's a little bit about Radio 101, maybe 201. Gwyneth, do you have any comments about our complaint that we together shared?
Yes. Okay. Now, both of my grandfathers were World War I veterans, okay? My father's father was actually at the Battle of the Somme, and he was at the Battle of the Somme for many, 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 many years, in between medical leave, in between time in the cooler, and such like, okay? He was honorably discharged eventually because he had tuberculosis. But there were approximately 12 medical episodes, and it was only the 12th medical episode that finally got him discharged, which was the tuberculosis, okay? He was treated absolutely shamefully by the Veterans Affairs. His widow, he died at the age of 36 of pneumonia. And the reason why he got pneumonia was he only had a half of one lung. The reason why he only had a half of one lung is when he was at the Somme, he got mustard gassed, okay? His wife was not the recipient of any government benefits. And if it's, you know, the only reason that she did not fall into utter destitution was that her father was a wealthy businessman, and her father took her in, okay? And her father didn't start out as a wealthy businessman. He built his own business. He started out in Shepherd's Bush in London. My other grandfather was in the household cavalry, and his uncle was the Duke of Bedford, who was His Majesty's Chief of Horse. All of these are checkable facts. His name, my grandfather's name, was sometimes registered as William Jesse Long, sometimes registered as Jesse William Long, okay? But he was named after his uncle, whose name was William Long. And it's a historically verifiable fact. William Long was His Majesty's Chief of Horse. His last duty was at the coronation of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, riding the lead carriage horse. He also was treated shamefully by the military in retirement. He was exported to Australia on a soldier settler scheme and told that he would have a fully set up dairy farm when he got here. He got here and found that he had 200 acres of what the Australians call scrub, which means eucalyptus forest. In this case, it was Jarrah forest, that's Jarrah, which is a type of eucalyptus that has the proportions of a redwood tree. Okay? And that was, he was required to clear that forest in order to turn it into farmland. And the soil wasn't any good anyway, and after 14 years, he was forced to walk off. And by the way, he was told that he was getting given the farm when he was in England. When he came out to Australia, he found that he had a mortgage on the farm, that they had given him a mortgage, which he was expected to pay off. Now, you know, the military has an atrocious record of mistreating their own veterans. The government has an atrocious record of mistreating their own veterans, okay? They get their military trainees, the soldiers, they do set them against innocent civilians all over the world, and they wonder why these innocent civilians frequently take up arms just to defend their own lives, their own farms, and their own properties. They wonder why people don't like them very much, okay? People want their own farms, people want their own lives, their own families. They don't appreciate people coming down their driveway with a gun, telling them what to do, when they have not antagonized anyone. The soldiers, they go into regular villages all over the world. They molest the woman, they molest the children, they kill the men. This is what they do. And I would challenge anybody in the military to stand up and say they've never seen that happen, because it is so common. And I would seriously doubt any soldier who said that he has never ever seen that happen. And you know something, Vincent? It's just disgusting. They shouldn't be offered discounts for basically choosing to be the tool of such a horrible, horrible, corrupt system that does that sort of thing to innocent people all over the world. And like I say, I happen to have been on the receiving end of it in this country of Australia. And I understand most people who are in the military, they sign up and they don't know that this is what it's all about. Okay? And many people who sign up to the police do not know that they're actually signing up for an extortionate cartel. Why should they be offered a discount for whatever if they've got a history of complying with such things?
Hold that thought. I've got 2 exclamation points when we come back. So, Jimmy, in response to your email to John Statmiller, you're getting our opinions on how we feel about the military and veterans. So I have 2 points for Guineith on what you said. First, my father was in the U.S. Army, a World War II veteran, combat veteran. And he was involved in the liberation of the Philippines. Now, Japan conducted what's known as the Bataan Death March, where between 60,000, 80,000 American and Filipino prisoners were captured and forced by the Imperial Japanese Army as prisoners of war to be in the Bataan Death March. And there were about between 650 to 18,000 POW deaths. Those are the estimates. So my father saw the carnage as a result of this, and he was in the liberation of the Philippines. He was not in the Bataan Death March, but he saw the carnage, and he buried some of the bodies, and some of his peers were involved in capturing and imprisoning some of the Japanese warriors. One of them escaped. One of these Japanese warriors escaped. And my dad told me the story when I was young, and I remember it, and he remembered it to his dying day, that our guys caught this Japanese escaped warrior, prisoner. And when they caught him, they beat him up mercilessly. And it bothered my father at how badly this Japanese man was beaten by U.S. Army. The mental image I have is a fist fight where the Japanese really took this beating. And they brought the prisoner back alive. It bothered my father how rough we were on this Japanese warrior. But put this into the equation. This Japanese warrior was willing to maim, wound, kill anybody that was an American, and most likely did. But it bothered my father that, it was inhumane what we did to that guy, who was willing to do more than that to us. Number 2, I attended a college graduation. And this is where you go into those big auditoriums, and some people sit in the bleachers and the graduating students, and dignitaries sit on the main floor of the gymnasium or auditorium. And group by group, these young people who were about to be graduated were called up, like the arts majors, the people who are involved in drawing and painting and photography and, the arts graphics design, that kind of thing. They were called up and they got an applause, mild, very mild applause. Then the history majors were called up on stage, and they got a mild applause. The computer information technology students were called up, and they got a mild applause. The hard science majors, I'm talking about biology and chemistry and physics, they got a mild applause. Then came the recruiting officer for the military, dressed in full military uniform, decorations, brass, the military salad on the uniform. He talked about his students. He got a wild applause, standing ovation. And when his students came up on stage, they got the same thing. Wild applause, standing ovation. There's only like 6 or so of them, maybe 5 or 6. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. So the parents, as proud as they were of the arts majors, the history majors, the computer information technology majors, the hard science majors, they didn't see anything like the applause of their children that these few military majors received. And my thought was, I can't believe it. There's a standing ovation for applause. So class, if you have a grandson or a granddaughter who's thinking of enlisting in the volunteer army because of all the cool travel that he or she will be offered, here's a statistic that you might want to share with that young person. Roughly 20 veterans a day commit suicide nationwide. That's from the Department of Veteran Affairs. That's their estimate. And in 2014, more than 7,400 veterans took their own lives. 7,400 veterans took their own lives. That's about 18% of all suicides in America. Now, veterans make up less than 9% of the population. So something really, really serious is going on with these veterans who are killing themselves at twice the rate of suicides of the rest of us. So I just wanted to share that with you. Yes, the military is pretty rough. And yes, it is a business of life and death on both sides. Life and death on both sides. So for those of you who are looking forward to a war, I'm here to tell you that my father, my grandfather, my uncles were in wars, pretty serious wars, World War I and World War II. And they all suffered, and their families suffered. And my dad was a school teacher and a school principal. And sometimes he would have a great deal of difficulty going to school in the morning as a principal. Because the night before, he would have a nightmare, which was very frequently, many times a week. And I could hear him screaming, "Get the gun, get the gun, get the gun," because of the horrors of war that he saw. His eyes would be wide open. He'd be searching around, looking all over for the enemy. He was in the bedroom. Sometimes he would just fall out of bed, reaching for the gun that wasn't there, the gun that was there 10 years before, in the 1940s. So in the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, and on, he had these nightmares. They were vivid nightmares. He was replaying and replaying and replaying and replaying in his mind these situations, these life and death situations. And often he would fall out of bed and get a black eye because he would land face first. And then he would go to school as the principal with a black eye. It's like, "Mr. Finelli, who did you get in a fight with?" How do you explain that? How do you explain that, today it's called post-traumatic stress, right?
Yeah.
Back then it was called shell shock. How do you explain that to the students that, you really weren't into a fight. It was you were reliving the horrors of war. I don't know anyone. I don't know a single person who was involved in the military who has seen combat that was not scarred. Not one person.
Yep.
Not one.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you. maybe we should make it clear we're not actually against combat veterans here, okay?
No, we're not.
What we're against is a system that is so hypocritical that it bags us for saying that we don't support discounts to veterans when the very veteran affairs system itself just is so totally corrupt that they seem to deliberately do things to make life harder for the military veterans. Just
Yes.
like my one grandfather was virtually cheated into coming out to Australia from having an upper middle class lifestyle with his wife in the middle of London, and being in the household cavalry, which was about the cushiest military career that you could imagine, really. Your combat, your chances of seeing combat are pretty minimal, and yet he went to. They do rotate into war zones around the world in the household cavalry, and he went to Belgium to help. The word is mop up at the end of World War I, and that's where he met my grandmother. But my other grandfather, actually having 3/4 of his lung tissue removed because it was burnt out by mustard gas, and then getting sent back to the front at the Battle of the Somme, one of the worst military battles in history. It's kind of unfair and hypocritical to then go off at us for pointing out that the whole military system is nothing but a military cartel of armed thugs who these days, other wars in the past, you could argue that maybe some of them were justified to get rid of the likes of Adolf Hitler and, Benito Mussolini and the rest of them, and the Kaiser Wilhelm. But you know something, most wars today are basically countries going into other countries with a band of armed thugs so that they can rob those other countries of their own resources, usually mineral resources, but sometimes, just for the fact of, that this country is actually maybe beginning to prosper a little bit too much and needs to be brought down a peg or two. You know what I mean? Does that make sense to you, Vincent?
It does, and also this makes sense to me. So we have veterans who volunteer for the military.
They have no idea what they're getting into.
Right, and then they get injured. And let's say one of them is injured in combat or training exercise, or somehow is injured while in the military and ends up in a wheelchair. Now, my heart goes out to those. It really does. But how does that compare to a child riding a bicycle who is hit by a vehicle operated by a distracted, careless driver and ends up in a wheelchair? Now, what I was trying to say is there are unfortunately way too many people who are at a disadvantage of one kind or another. And if Lowe's is going to offer a discount to the military because of the potential for injury, what about those who are injured at the hand of someone who is careless, who injures them for life, like a child hit on a bicycle by a careless driver, okay, or someone who has been blinded at a work injury? A guy volunteers to work at a factory, okay, he volunteers, gets compensated, and something happens, there's an accident, gets blinded. That person is at a disadvantage. So what I was trying to say, and maybe I didn't say it carefully enough, is that there are plenty of people, unfortunately, who are at a disadvantage. And if Lowe's is going to offer a discount to the military, I think they ought to offer a discount to everyone else who is at a disadvantage as well. I am not saying that I'm against the military, because I think we need a strong defense. I don't think we need to beat up countries because of our corporate desires for profits. I don't think that's right at all. I think that's immoral. But I do think that there are plenty of people, if Lowe's is in AT&T and all these companies that give these discounts to the military, I think they should offer them to other people as well, or take them all away and lower everybody's prices.
Yeah. Well, there's another thing there. After the Eildon State Forest thing, okay, we were chased through that forest by a menagerie police / militarized police / military that I've described already a number of times. My sons and I were chased through that forest most directly by a pack of Alsatians, okay? And we fled for our very lives. I had a bow and arrow, compound bow, but we fled through the night to get away from these Alsatians and from these people who wanted to kill us. I'm absolutely convinced of that. And for a long, long time after that, my son, every single day, at the very hour of the day, my younger son, where our chase began, where we first realized there's a pack of dogs on us, there's a maneuver against us. I would say there would have to have been at least 30 or 40 people in this maneuver, okay? Every single day for at least 6 months after that, my younger son, would go into a glaze-eyed fit where he would just start screaming at the top of his lungs, "No! Get away from me! Ah!" And he would run into the forest screaming at the top of his lungs. His eyes were glazed, and he did not know where he was. I believe that was a severe post-traumatic stress disorder type manifestation that he was having, where in his mind he was back in that state forest being chased by those Alsatians. Mm-hmm. And the jet skis, the Black Hawk helicopters, the spotter planes, the tin boats, the aluminium boats.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back. So in response to Jimmy's email to John Statmiller, the owner of Republic Broadcasting, been talking about for almost 2 hours now, I hope Guineith and I have clarified our position. We are pro-veteran, but we're not in favor of special treatment for special groups of people unless all disadvantaged groups receive those same discounts. Now, some people may say, well, Vinny, how'd you handle the Get Prepared Expo? You gave discounts. Yeah, and here's how I did it. I said on the air many, 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 many times, if you need a scholarship to the Get Prepared Expo, just tell someone at the gate, and I will buy, I'll pay for your entry to the Get Prepared Expo. So if anyone feels he needs it or she needs it, I'll pay for it. And so what was an extreme situation? Well, one of our class called up and said, hey, he'd like to come to the expo. And he needed a pass. I said, no problem. And he said, and his wife needs one too. I said, no problem. And he said he had 7 children. And I said, no problem. And they all showed up at the expo. Event after event after event after event. And I paid for all of them. Why? Because he said he needed it. That's fine with me. I didn't say prove it. By the way, show me your income tax statement. Show me your pay stub or your lack of one. He said he needed it, and so did some others. And I bought their tickets. As simple as that. As a matter of fact, I told every person at the gate, if anyone asks for a scholarship, give it to them. No questions asked. None. We're going to believe everyone that wants one and give it to them. No questions asked. Which is exactly different from Lowe's giving special treatment to special groups or a special group.
Yeah.
So that's how I handle it.
I don't see anybody lining up to give us special treatment, except of the most negative kind.
By the way,
hey,
let me share.
I'll mention something on air, by the way, with regards to special treatment. Okay? The last few weeks or maybe couple of months, now and again, okay, I'll probably spend in excess of 90% of my time at home. Okay? I might go out one day a week or one day a fortnight. And we live on a rural, fairly remote, given that we don't have a motor vehicle, we live 20 kilometres from the nearest small town of about 900 people. We have been having flyovers with Black Hawks over our property. The most recent one, there were 5 Black Hawk helicopters flew just to one side, actually, not straight over the top, but just to one side of our property, one after the other, and probably at around about 500 feet altitude, okay? And they were flying, not overly fast, not overly slow. They weren't circling, they weren't hovering or anything. They were just on their way somewhere. But I think that it's really interesting. The last couple of months, we've been maybe getting a Black Hawk flyover once every week or two. I think that that's really, really interesting. It hasn't just been, my sons have seen them, I've seen them. I can't think of any reason why they would be doing that unless they were on their way somewhere, maybe to harass somebody else who is fleeing through a state forest to get away from them. I don't quite know what's going on there. I view them, of course, with suspicion. I'm not afraid of them. I'm curious as to what they're doing.
Guineith,
but I don't think I'm likely to get any answers anytime soon.
Right. Let me just, you talked about Alsatians.
To the class.
You talked about Alsatians during this broadcast. Class,
yep.
In the United States, we know them as German Shepherds. They weigh, 66 to 88 pounds. And imagine having a pack of German Shepherds chasing you. Guineith, thank you so much for being with me today and sharing your thoughts.
Have a great day, won't you?
And you too.